let's go look at some of this wonderful game that you brought with us.
All right, so here's Fallout 3. I'm gonna play and talk, see what we can do.
There's not one moment, it's the interaction with the NPCs and the shades of gray you have, and, making complex moral choices.
And so we, vet that through our, does it make sense, how cool is it, and how does it fit in, so...
It is hard to deny the legacy that this game has left behind. At the time of its release, Fallout 3 was adored by critics and fans alike, winning multiple game rewards, and a lot of people would probably rate it as one of the best RPGs ever made. By the end of 2015, it had sold around 12 million copies, and how could all of these achievements not be justified? With its amazing atmosphere and setting, the success of this 2008 hit was almost guaranteed. Even today, it is still regarded as one of the few masterpieces of the gaming industry. I can tell you right now that I have played a lot of Fallout 3. An unhealthy amount of time was spent investigating every corner of this game multiple times. There isn't a single side quest, structure or rock that hasn't been explored. However, the question that still bugs my mind is why? Despite what the majority of people say, I do believe that Fallout 3 is actually a bad game. Many aspects of this product that others have praised are, to me, an incoherent mess rather than a cohesive experience. I'm sorry to say this, but Fallout 3 simply isn't up to the standard that people should expect from the same guys who made Morrowind. To explain the main reason why I believe this, it would require me to deconstruct many segments of the game, after which it would be good to condense all of my experience into understandable arguments that show a much clearer picture as to why Fallout 3 is actually bad. I've always been curious about how life would look after a global nuclear war. My imagination always showed people living in enclosed bunkers, scavengers fighting for scraps in the wild, a large number of roaming gangs, and to top it all off, a rubble of cities on display that now only serve as monuments to past failures. A world created on the ashes of the old one. The wasteland gives as much as it takes. With no civilizations left to keep the peace, how many survivors would succumb to depravity and animalistic instincts, and how many would retain their humanity in the face of this cruel and sinister life? The potential of such a setting captivated a certain gaming studio called Interplay. It seemed that a story like that would be a natural fit for a video game, and they sure capitalized on that idea by creating a product that became a cult classic, simply called Wasteland. An open-world, role-playing video game with an unusual approach to storytelling. Mostly due to its dark theme and unsettling premise, players took on the role of one of the so-called Desert Rangers assigned to investigate disturbances in many post-apocalyptic areas, and in doing so, they encountered various shady characters. The game was a financial and critical success, so it was only natural for Interplay to consider making a sequel. Unfortunately, another Wasteland game wouldn't be possible at the time, since the rights to the IP were being held by their publisher, EA, meaning that if they wanted to expand on the idea, they needed to do something different. After many obstacles, disagreements, and most importantly, time, the new project called Fallout, a post-nuclear RPG was finally finished. The game improved on an already intriguing premise by including incredible world building, interesting characters, various monsters created through radiation mutation, secretive factions with dark agendas, and a wacky 1950s vibe that appears to collide with the futuristic setting. However, the biggest aspect of Fallout was its emphasis on choice. Different problems could be solved with different solutions, while the actions that players took would have a significant impact on the world around them. Add to that an intriguing mystery that involves a horde of menacing super mutants, and you've got yourself a fantastic setting for exploration. It is also one of the first games to implement a deep character creation screen where differently built characters would have different experiences during the gameplay. It was an amazing hit, eclipsing Interplay's previous title Wasteland in almost almost every aspect. The groundwork for an awesome series was laid. Some of the developers even broke off to form a separate studio within the company called Black Isle Studios to work exclusively on the Fallout franchise. They had already started their work on the sequel and its development was nothing short of a nightmare. To begin with, the Black Isle Studios had only 18 months to create this game, as opposed to the 3.5 years that it took to make Fallout 1. Add to that the expectation that the sequel had to be bigger and better than the original. It didn't help that the three of the first game's creative leads, including Timothy Kane, left the project early due to the conflicting visions for the game's direction. Time constraints that were put in place had a real impact on the development, with crunch being a normal occurrence during this period, and even some of the Planetscape Torment developers had to come in to help. Despite all of this, Fallout 2 was somehow released, and what's more, it was proven to be a worthy successor to the previous game. Set 80 years after the original, the game depicted the recovering world of Fallout, with even more locations, factions and quests to complete. Combat and leveling have been greatly improved, and the fate of the world, like in Fallout 1, is left to the player. Despite the critical acclaim, the financial status told a different story, with only 123,000 copies sold by the year 2000. With that came a series of financial troubles that were crippling the studio's infrastructure. It was more apparent by the day that Interplay was a sinking ship, so in order to avoid total bankruptcy, the company went public on the stock exchange in 1998. Even after that, the studio was still suffering losses, which led them to seek additional funding, the most notable of which was from a Paris-based company called Titus Interactive, which gave them around $35 million of investment. After this, the studio was rescued from deep water. Even after having poor sales, Interplay still wanted to push new Fallout games out. But this time Black Isle Studios was not going to develop the new title. That honor was given to a different studio called Microforte, and they eventually released Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel in 2001. Although it received some attention, it was a very different experience than the previous games. Instead of the more story-oriented nature of Fallout 1 and 2, more emphasis was placed on combat and squad-based fighting. Although it was well received, it did not set any sales records. However, that would be the least of Interplay's problems because new financial troubles were slowly starting to appear. The company has undergone drastic changes to the management and the direction, which included laying off the entire Black Isle Studios staff and letting go Brian Fargo, one of the company's founding developers. In the midst of the chaos, Fallout 3 was actually in development but was ultimately cancelled. However, the demo still exists, so you can go out and find it if you really want to. The footage that you are now seeing is a glimpse of what kind of a game Interplay's Fallout 3 could have been. However, instead of getting a new sequel to this amazing series, we instead got Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. In what could be considered as one of the worst games ever made, this game had barely anything to do with previous titles. Horrible combat, non-existing RPG mechanics and an overall detachment from everything that makes this series so good made it easy to see why sales weren't exactly through the roof. The situation at the company was worse than ever, with many employees leaving due to not getting paid. During this period, a very prominent video game studio called Bethesda, famous for its Elder Scrolls series, reached out to Interplay for a license to create Fallout 3. Interplay initially agreed to this, but after declaring bankruptcy in 2006, they were forced to make an extreme decision. So to pay off a portion of their immense debt, the entire Fallout IP was sold to Bethesda indefinitely. Interplay no longer had any ownership over one of their biggest titles, and so the development of Fallout 3 started under the new roof. Director and executive producer of Bethesda, Todd Howard, himself stated that he absolutely loved the original games, and it was something his studio wanted to do for quite some time now. They wanted to innovate with the series while at the same time staying true to what made it great. Drastic changes to the gameplay were made. The most obvious one was the shift from an isometric viewpoint to the first person. This meant that the combat had to adapt to this new direction while still attempting to maintain the iconic VATS system. With many changes like this, accompanied by 4 years of development, Fallout 3 was finally released. Which gets us to the point of this video. So why did I tell you about all of this? Well, the story inside this famous franchise is almost as interesting as the one around it. The natural way of how game development works, as well as the events that eventually led to the changes that resulted in the game we all know today, are crucial parts in understanding how Fallout 3 was made. Throughout this video, I will refer to older games to demonstrate why this installment simply does not work. This way you can get a comprehensive idea of how Bethesda missed crucial aspects while developing a game of this magnitude. There are a lot of things wrong with Fallout 3's structure and I will try to cover most of them, but for now let's take a look at the very beginning. The starting segment is widely despised by almost everyone. The most probable reason why is because it is criminally long, but even worse than that, it is also unnecessary. This first section depicts your early life inside the vault, with interactions with various NPCs thrown in for good measure. All of this I consider a waste of time because speaking with them provides you with pointless dialogue and information that serves no purpose. The only person you should be concerned about is your dad, since the game wants you to develop a connection with him. Some people have actually defended this section by comparing Fallout 3 with other titles like Mass Effect, and pointing out the fact that games sometimes start in a more enclosed environment for the purpose of exposition regarding the main story elements. The emphasis on main story elements is very important to distinguish in that sentence because it doesn't apply to Fallout 3. The stuff that you are forced to hear in the beginning segment has no narrative value since all of it is just poorly implemented filler placed here to take up your time until you can finally start the game and go exploring. It doesn't even matter that this part is poorly done because Fallout games never directly handed you any answers or story elements. It was you who had to investigate the narrative. It was important to find out for yourself what the story is. It was an intriguing approach because you're not spoon-fed information, but instead you chose to learn on your own. But here you're placed in the box. You get to play as a baby and attend your birthday party. All of these things take so much time and have no narrative value, so it is extremely strange that they decided to make it this long. One of the early parts that I simply don't understand is when you have to undergo a GOAT test. It is basically structured as a part of the game where you decide what skills you want to be proficient in. After the test is over, the game determines what skills you might be adept at based on your answers, but even with that, you can reverse the decision the game made for you and still pick completely different skills. So what was the point of all of this? It's already time for some comparisons. When you start a new game in Fallout 1 or 2, the first thing you have to do is create your character, and after you're finished, the game just starts. The beginning isn't long because it doesn't need to be. After all, the most celebrated aspect of Fallout games is the feeling of adventure. Create a character and go exploring. I guess the primary reason why the developers wanted you to be stuck in this segment is because they wanted to establish the connection between your dad and you. And I can understand that, but that could have been achieved without putting the player in a cage. It's lazy and contrary to what the series is famous for. After 19 years of your character's life inside the vault, the player awakens to their friend Amanda, who warns them that the Overseer is on their tail because your father escaped the vault, something that is quite forbidden. What follows is a poorly thought out segment where you are supposed to escape. After you leave your room in search of a way out, one of the officers sent by the Overseer spots you and then attempts to murder you.
There he is. Hold it right there!
Officer Kimball, a guy you've known your entire life, is now trying to execute you on the spot. What's more is that he is not the only one. The guards simply want you dead. With the exception of one, there is no interaction you can have with them. It is kill or be killed from now on. Why can't there be an option for a dialogue with the people you've shared a home for the past 2 decades? You can, however, talk with the Overseer himself at one point, but he just doesn't give a shit. There is no way to reason with him. He wants you dead. End of story. If you kill him, Amanda will actually get pissed at you as if it was my fucking fault that her dad became so adamant about taking my head. It doesn't make any sense. None of these characters act in a natural human way. I get the feeling that it was designed this way because the game wanted to teach you how your choices have consequences and that not everything can be solved by mindless shooting. But that is not the lesson I took away from this. Amanda will reprimand me for killing her dad, yet she will shed no tears for the dead guards that were sent to apprehend me. But no, killing the overseer is somehow more morally wrong, even though he was the one who escalated the situation to the point where I had to defend myself. You know what, let's just get out of here. Once you finally leave the vault, the game officially starts. From now on, you can explore and interact with the world as much as you want. The only thing you know at this point is that you need to find your dad. After a shaky start, let's talk about something positive. I can say that gameplay-wise, Fallout 3 feels like it's ahead of past games, not by decades but by centuries. Unlike in the past, the inventory system is beautifully organized and even categorizes items so that you can easily find what you're looking for. Not only that, but whenever I replay Fallout 3, the part after leaving the vault is usually the best time I have with the game. You leave the only home you ever knew with basically nothing. Desperate for any kind of relief, you start to scavenge as much as possible. You try finding some work in the nearby town because you have no money. The quest might direct you to a faraway location, so on your way there you scan the nearby ruins for any piece of equipment that might be useful. Then you start digging through dumpsters in the hope of finding something that could be sold back in town. Stim packs are extremely expensive to use at this point in time, so finding food is the only viable option to regain health. On your way to finish the side quest, you try to avoid trouble as much as possible. You are simply not equipped enough to deal with the dangers of the wasteland. You somehow manage to complete the job, but since you are here, you might as well explore a bit more. The supplies you have are not enough to overcome the incoming challenges, so scavenging continues. At some point you kill a guy in an abandoned church who was attacking you, and on his corpse you find a clue to a location called Oasis, which contains one of the best side quests in the game. The very beginning, after you leave the vault, is where the game is at its best, but the problem is that the honeymoon phase is extremely short. The reason for this is that the scavenging phase, in which you truly believe that you are in a desolate world, is all just an illusion. It is extremely easy to get a full arsenal of weapons and supplies very early. When you first visit Megaton, there is a quest chain that the trader by the name of Moria gives you. It includes investigating various abandoned areas so that she can write her survival guide. One of the first places she points you to is an abandoned supermarket. When you actually get there, you find out that the place is filled with bandits, but that isn't much of a problem since killing them is basically a joke, even at the highest difficulty. Once you have looted the entire supermarket as well as the bodies of dead NPCs, you are so well equipped with weapons and supplies that the past hour you spent scavenging items seems like a completely different game. What's more, Moira will soon send you to another area known as the minefield, where you can get a sniper rifle from the guy who is shooting at you, as well as not one but two scoped 44 Magnum revolvers. These are some of the best pieces of equipment in the game. Stim packs and other drugs that help you in combat are available in abundance. From now on you will actively search for the fight, as more dead bandits will drop even more items. The game very soon becomes a cakewalk, which appears to be in stark contrast to the vision that the developers had for Fallout 3. From their comments, it is easy to conclude that they wanted to create an RPG in which your resources are a valuable asset, with the player constantly scouring the wasteland for anything of value. Before each battle, you had to determine whether the fight is worthwhile and how much you can afford to spend on supplies. It is obvious that they wanted to implement a sense of scarcity, but how much scarcity do you feel when a merchant in the middle of fucking nowhere has a fully functional missile launcher with some ammo to go with it? Shouldn't equipment like this be available only at a few high-tech locations at the steep prices? The missile launcher issue is just one example. Most of the advanced weaponry in the game, such as miniguns, are very easy to obtain. Even Fat Man, the most powerful weapon, is just handed to you very early while following the main quest line. The game doesn't want you to feel like you're missing out, so here is one of the best weapons for you to play with.
Oh shit, I'm sorry.
Everything I've just said, including confining you in a small environment and then showering you with equipment in what is supposed to be a survival in the wasteland, is just a small piece of the larger puzzle that reveals the game's main problem. And that is handholding. Fallout 3 is simply too afraid of the fact that you might get lost or stranded, so it constantly gives away items so that you can keep up. When in actuality, good equipment should be a reward for the player if they have decided to go that extra mile to complete a side quest or explore something. So you have to ask yourself, how cool is it to find a fat man or a minigun when they are just handed away? The problem of handholding doesn't just stop here, it affects many other elements of Fallout 3, especially when you take a look at the leveling system. At first glance, Fallout 3 has a very similar leveling to its predecessors Fallout 1 and 2. Special points, skills and perks all make their return except for traits for some reason. Upon leveling up, you may choose to upgrade certain skills as well as pick a perk that has a special effect. Even here, the issue of the game constantly holding in your hand is present. On the surface, you were supposed to create a distinct character who is either proficient or inept in different fields depending on how you spent your points. For example, putting points into lockpicking would allow you to enter some closed areas that you normally would not be able to enter, but because you can't be good at everything, you had to sacrifice other skills that could have helped you in different situations. Such trade-offs are common in these types of RPGs. They create a one-of-a-kind experience because the customized character you created that you believe is the best suited for your gameplay. Fallout 3 on the other hand gives an absurd amount of points to spend on each level, as well as perks that help in many different ways. There wasn't a single moment where I felt that I solved the problem simply because of the speciality of my character. In Fallout 1, you had to be very careful when you leveled up because you had a very limited number of points, so you had to choose specific fields that your character excelled in. A very good example of this is if you were good with science, you could activate a nuclear warhead that is hidden in the last level, meaning you could blow up the last base in the game without even talking to the main antagonist. On the other hand, if you neglected your repair skill, you won't be able to fix a generator in the research facility and talk with Zax, which is an AI that has some vital story-related information. Do you see what is going on? The game molds around your playstyle. Meanwhile, in Fallout 3, even as you get near level 30, which is the max level, most of the important skills will already be maxed out, making you a powerhouse in almost every field. And I think I know why Bethesda decided to go with this route. When it comes to leveling, having limited options increases the likelihood that players might make an awful character. The developers were probably scared that the players would make the wrong choice when upgrading their attributes, and by fixing that they created a completely new problem that destroyed the unique experience that the old games managed to achieve. Fallout 1 can be played in a variety of ways. You could be a karate-skilled doctor or a scientist who is good with big weapons. The main factor here is that you could never be both in one playthrough because the game did not give you enough points. As a result, the game is both more difficult and more rewarding. In Fallout 3, that amazing aspect had to be sacrificed for the sake of convenience. Another problem I had with the leveling system is that some skills leave more to be desired. Let's take repair as an example. By the name alone, you can already guess that this skill measures how effectively you can fix a certain piece of equipment, but the system itself is extremely shallow. The way you can repair is by picking up a duplicate version of the equipment you have and then combining them in your inventory. That's all there is to it. If you don't want to give money to vendors, this is the only way you can repair your equipment, so I really hope you don't mind picking up spares. Naturally, this presents a problem with the unique weapons that you get in DLCs because, like the name implies, they are unique. There are no duplicate versions of them. The reason I'm so disappointed is because this is a huge waste of potential. Fallout 3's world is filled with junk items that are spread all over the place. 99% of them you will never pick up because there is no reason to do that. So why are they not more integrated into the crafting system where you could use them to fix your gadgets? The item that first comes to mind is scrap metal, which has a recognized value since a lot of NPCs in the world ask you to collect it for them so they could use it in their own projects. Why isn't the same possibility extended to the player? It is such a waste. However, all of this is nothing compared to how the speech was handled.
With nary a tit to suckle. Sorry about your mom, truly. But life goes on. Daddy lied. Life's full of little disappointments.
While talking to NPCs, sometimes there might be a dialogue option that requires you to pass a speech check, and if you do, you convince a person into doing something they normally won't agree to do. This is something that past games did as well, but again, Fallout 3 made a watered down version of it. First of all, the speech skill only influences the chance you might have at convincing someone, meaning that even if you decide to focus more on speech, you still might fail due to having bad luck. This is extremely unsatisfying, and ultimately, people will resort to save scumming if they do not get the desired outcome. As a result, the player never feels like they came out on top during the dialogue because of their smart skill investment, but because of a stupid chance. What's worse, most of these options don't make any sense. Interacting with other characters in conversation is an important part of the Fallout games. NPCs should be more than just some polygons on screen. You should feel like they are actual people with whom you can enter into meaningful discussions about the world or any other important subject. The speech checks in Fallout 3 go completely against that. Characters can have their entire ideals and motivations altered simply because you won a game of chance. Let's do this again. In Fallout 1, the speech skill gave you additional dialogue options with the characters, allowing you to pursue a reasonable discussion with them in a way that allowed you to explain to them why they should listen to you. It is an intricate system with a lot of depth for such an old game. But here, a character may tell you the very reason he gets out of bed every morning, and you can change that about him by giving him one line of dialogue that isn't even that reasonable or anywhere near good enough to convince someone out of their beliefs. However, even if these speech checks are horribly handled, I do have to give credit where credit is due, because Fallout 3 kept some aspects of old games when it comes to speech, specifically the way other skills influence actual dialogue. What I mean by this is that if you are good with science, you can engage with an NPC on a scientific topic in conversation. You can actually have unique dialogue options that display your advanced knowledge on the subject. This is such a good system that it made me reconsider how RPGs should operate. Being good with medicine is no longer just a modifier that determines how quickly you will heal yourself, but rather a valuable skill that you can apply in a variety of situations. This is not just restricted to your skills, because there are also unique perks like the Black Widow, which you can get if you play a female character that is used in seducing certain NPCs in dialogue. Overall, it is a very interesting system. However, as is always the case, I can only praise this feature to a limited extent, because if you played this game as much as I did, you would notice that these utilities are few and far between. These options really only happen on a few occasions, and half the time they only result in an NPC just being impressed with you with no other benefits. It is such a shame that this aspect of the gameplay wasn't worked on more, because it is just another disappointment in what could have been one of the best games ever made. Sometimes I wonder what's the point in talking with people when the game just tells me where I need to go, which actually leads us to the next subject I wanted to discuss. In hbomberguy video called Fallout 3 is garbage and here is why, he mentions how the cursor on your compass that always tells you where you need to go for selected quests is one of the game's worst features. And that conclusion is absolutely spot on. Since you are always fixated on this, you probably didn't notice all the nice details in the world of Fallout 3. Despite some major issues with the game's design, which I will discuss later, the world itself is beautifully structured, with many details and a lot of environmental storytelling elements that give the game its depressing tone. I can't imagine how much time it took the people at Bethesda to make a desolate world on such a massive scale. It is clear that a lot of effort and passion was put into making this wasteland, so I simply can't understand why they decide to downplay it with this damn cursor. One of the best parts of the Fallout series is exploration, but exploration that you do on your own. You are thrown in a world that you know nothing about, so you must navigate it based on what other people have told you or any other information that you manage to get. To indulge in your surroundings so that you can make a rational decision about where to go next. This cursor nullifies all of that, since it gives you no room to think for yourself. It was clearly put in there so that the players don't feel lost or overwhelmed. But you should feel lost. You should feel like you need to make the most out of a bad situation. The wasteland is an unpredictable and hostile place. Some pieces of information you get might not be completely correct or even true, but it should be up to the player to decide what to do next. I was always wondering if this cursor was meant to be here from the very beginning. I came to that conclusion because there are some quests that give you enough information so that you can decide on your own where to go. One of the best examples of this is at the very beginning when you leave the vault. The main quest that requires you to find your father points you to Megaton, which is a town nearby. The problem here is that there is no logical way for your character to know this. At this point, you don't know anything about the outside world, let alone where Megaton is or why would you want to go there, but the visual aspects of the game are clearly pointing you in that direction. It's the first thing you see in the distance, and if you miss it and go down the road, the signs still tell you about the town nearby, and once you enter the town, the NPC at the entrance starts interacting with you and tells you where you can ask about your father. It's such a natural way of exploring, where the game gives you plenty of hints on where to go, while at the same time it still feels rewarding to discover the solution on your own. Unfortunately, most of the quests are nothing like that, so you are simply forced to follow the cursor, otherwise you won't know where to go. Most of the time, Fallout 3 feels like the kind of game you can play while the podcast or any other video is playing in the background, since it requires no deductive reasoning on your part to overcome its challenges. But even if the game removed the quest marker and made you think for yourself, it would still suffer from horribly designed quests. Most of them are shallow and not interesting because they don't capitalize on what makes quests in Fallout so compelling. Things like having multiple interesting ways of solving a problem, which include how proficient you are in certain skills, what items you have with you at the moment, and what companions are following you. All All of these factors create a captivating gameplay that revolves around the character you created until you are confronted with the challenges of a specific quest. However, none of this exists in Fallout 3, because the vast majority of its quests are simply fetch jobs disguised as something more. For example, some escaped slaves want you to clear a certain area so that they can establish a new base there. Once you get to the location, it is revealed that some slavers have taken residence. At this point, you could choose to give up the escaped slaves to them or continue with your original plan to clear the area. That is the only choice you are given. What your character is as a person or his fields of expertise cannot be used for some kind of new or interesting way to resolve a problem. Not that there is much room left for options, the quest I just described is very straightforward with little room for nuance. It's not like these two groups can coexist in the same area in any reasonable way. The base of this quest isn't particularly interesting, so the experience of playing it will end up being not much different. So I decided to kill all the slavers, inform the escaped slaves that the area was safe, and that was the end of it. The job is done. I don't want you to believe that I think that every quest should be a groundbreaking experience or that it shouldn't be linear, but when 95% of them are like that, then we have a problem. The biggest reason that this is such a letdown is because there are some quests with genuinely good ideas. If they had just a little bit more polish, they would have been amazing. The best example of this is Blood Ties. It is one of the first side quests that you can come across while in Megaton. The resident, Lucy West, asks you to deliver a letter to her family, which lives in a town that is quite far away from where you are. When you get there, a lone guard named Evan King tosses a grenade at you in the fear that you might attack the town. After some conversation, he apologizes and explains that they have been under repeated attacks by a gang called the Family. When you go to check on Lucy's parents, you see that they have been killed, while her brother is missing. So you try to locate this gang in order to find out what happened to him. When you reach their hideout, they will not attack you, so you can engage with them in conversation. The leader of the family, called Vance, explains how he's helping his members overcome their hunger for human flesh by drinking human blood, something similar to vampires that he heard in the old stories. You can convince him to tell you where Lucy's brother is and then give you permission to speak with him. Talking with Ian will confirm that he was not kidnapped but voluntarily joined the family after killing his parents. After a childhood encounter with a threatening wastelander, Ian has craved human flesh and blood. It is at this point that you must convince him to leave the family for good. You could try to pass a speech check, but since I started this quest by talking with Lucy, you could give him her letter. After reading it, he will decide to leave and go home. It is very interesting because if you started the quest by simply discovering the town with no prior knowledge of who lives there, you would not have that option. An asset that you gained simply by starting the quest differently gives you the upper hand. After that, a player can talk with Vance, and if you have high enough medicine skill, you can convince him to use blood packs instead of attacking the residents of the previously mentioned town. Following that, he rewards you with the schematics for the shish kebab, one of my most favorite melee weapons in the game. And as I already stated, there are still other ways to approach this quest, and in the end you are rewarded with a unique piece of equipment that you will not find anywhere else. Keep in mind that the quest could be done better, with perhaps more choices about how to deal with the family and Lucy's brother. There is still room to improve it, but overall I wish more of Fallout 3 was like this. Instead, we get a lot of filler quests, the ones that are there simply because you need to be under the illusion that this world is rich and deep. Some of them are such a chore that I'm left wondering, why do they even exist? Rather than just talking to an NPC, why can't there be more innovative ways of starting a quest? For example, you could walk into a toilet only to find a dead body, and now you are implicated in a situation that requires you to discover what is going on. Or perhaps you overheard some kind of conspiracy and then it is up to you how to approach it. The game is missing this kind of back and forth where it throws you into interesting situations while you least expect it. Instead of that, you are actively asking every NPC if they have some kind of a job they could give you so that you might kill some time. And whenever you find one, it is always simple and requires no thought on your part. What's more, all of this is tied with the infamous karma system. Karma is a feature that was also present in the past games. As the name implies, it stands for your general reputation. It is the reflection of all the good and evil choices you made during the game and how they were perceived by the inhabitants of the wasteland. Whether you lose or gain karma depends on the type of quest that you are doing combined with the choices you made during it. A Nice Day for a Right Wedding is a perfect example of an evil quest where you lose karma. There is this girl in Rivet City called Angela who is falls in love with the other resident, Diego. However, Diego is not noticing her because of his religion, and he also has plans to become a priest. Angela requests that the player give her Ant Queen pheromones, which is something of an aphrodisiac drug so that she can seduce him. If the player decides to give her the pheromones, she will use them on Diego, after which he will leave the church and even marry Angela a few days later. So it is easy to see how completing a quest like this results in you losing karma points. Wait, what the fuck? The karma system in Fallout 3 is a mystery to me, because I can't comprehend why it even exists in this form at all. You thought I was joking when I told you about that quest a second ago? No! For some reason, helping to drug a man so that he will marry a person with whom he does not want to be because of his beliefs is considered a morally right option. This is just the start of my problems when discussing this feature. Most of the time, morally dubious quests and choices simply don't give you good enough of a reason to be evil. In my understanding, people who are generally immoral are like this because it is the fastest way, or probably the only way, to get what they want. More often than not, it includes hurting people who are in their way of that goal. Fallout 3 does not understand this concept. The choices are evil just for the sake of being evil. They are equivalent to you punching a random person on the street for no apparent reason. One of the best examples of this can be found in a quest called The Power of the Atom. The town of Megaton, which I already mentioned multiple times, has a potentially dangerous atomic bomb in its center. The town's sheriff wants you to disarm the bomb in the hopes of preventing future accidents. However, if you walk into a bar, an enigmatic stranger engages you in conversation where he tells you that he wants you to activate the bomb instead. He further explains that he works for a guy who wants this town wiped out. If you agree to his plan, you must arm the bomb, then travel to a remote location on a Tenpenny Tower where you will meet the guy known as Tenpenny, who was the one behind this whole operation, and there, from his balcony, the bomb can be activated. This is the side quest that Bethesda was especially proud of for some reason. They showed the impressive explosion in the trailer, they talked about it in the interviews, and just to make sure you couldn't miss it, all the important characters involved in it are located in positions that can be avoided, and they are the ones that engage you in conversation. You absolutely could not miss this epic thing we did. You can blow up an entire town, there is so much choice here. But if you stopped and looked a little deeper into the structure of this quest, you would realize that it simply doesn't make any logical sense for you to activate the bomb. For starters, when you actually ask Tenpenny why he wants the town destroyed, he says that it is an eyesore that obstructs his view of the wasteland below. I don't even know where to start with explaining how stupid this is, but I will give it a try. Let's ignore the obvious irony that Megaton isn't even visible from his fucking balcony. That alone is not good enough of a reason for him or me to destroy an entire town. Not even his reward is good enough of an incentive. Not considering speech checks, blowing up Megaton gives you a room in Tenpenny Tower as well as 500 caps, while disarming the bomb gives you 100 caps and a room in Megaton. A measly 400 caps of difference to eradicate an entire town that hosts many NPC merchants and quest givers. If anything, doing this cuts you off from some of the content. There is no incentive for roleplaying here. Everything about this quest is misshaped, and it was advertised as one of the best in the game. There should have been more thought put into this. For starters, why couldn't Tenpenny's motivation be more understandable? Perhaps Megaton was a marketing force in the area, causing some serious competition for the underworld faction that Tenpenny was associated with. Maybe destroying Megaton will eliminate that competition for his benefit. By earning his trust, Tenpenny will see that you can be tasked with taking out the trash if necessary, opening up a completely new quest line. He could assign you various jobs that require you to do his dirty work across the wasteland for a large amount of caps. Your infamy as a hitman for hire may spread far and wide, with many communities rejecting you while previously hostile factions now welcome you with open arms. I just want something that will excuse such a radical action. Even if you have decided to destroy the town, the people of the wasteland don't even mention you committing this atrocity. The only ones who even comment on that are Three Dog and your dad. You would think that doing something like this would shake people around you a little bit. Perhaps they wouldn't trust someone who murders a slew of innocent people for a meager reward. But no, nobody cares. Not that it even matters, because the entire karma system itself doesn't have much of an impact on the world. You could be an extremely good person or a literal devil, and people will treat you the same way, because your actions don't carry over to the opinions of other NPCs. You could be mean to them individually, so they will start hating you, but reputation that you garnered serves no purpose when you are interacting with others. The morality of your behavior has very limited impact. If you have an evil playthrough, people at Paradise Falls will sometimes stop you and give you a reward, and the same applies if you have been good, but only this time people at Megaton will do the same. This one actually gets annoying really fast, like I'm just trying to go around my business and people are always stopping me to share their gifts. Like, please hurry, I have better things to do. Oh god, here comes another one. Hurry up, please, come on.
I wish there were more people like you in the world. I want you to have this.
Blood pack, that's all? To be fair, this system wasn't well developed in previous games either, but with such drastic choices that you can make, it seems strange that they wouldn't have some impact on how people in the wasteland perceive you. The only real time it makes sense to be evil is when you murder and steal on your own initiative. The reasoning for your cold-blooded actions is much more clear when you yourself decide to do them. Yeah, I killed this merchant because I wanted his stuff. It's pretty cut and dry, but the karma system isn't well integrated with the quests in the same way, leaving much to be desired. However, all of this probably isn't even that important if you are trying to play Fallout 3 as something of an adventure. Maybe you just want to wander around the wasteland, attempting to discover what this world has to offer and what its secrets are. This is actually pretty common. After all, freedom to do whatever you want is the big selling point of the franchise. And that leads me to this next section that covers exploration and design. I absolutely love turning on Galaxy Radio and just messing around, discovering different locations, paying attention to many details of the environment and trying to ignore the quest marker as much as possible. In many cases, this is what the game should be about. Making your own adventure. At the beginning, I always feel excited to leave the constraints of my vault and go exploring, but the perceived depth of the game's world is quickly revealed to be extremely shallow. What do I mean by this? I want you to consider this question. When you stumble across a seemingly interesting building or location, what do you expect to find? You probably enter the ominous looking structure hoping to find some loot or supplies to aid you on your journey. See, that is what you think is the case, but subconsciously you want to be surprised. Maybe this location holds a haunting mystery that you want to uncover, or maybe it houses some unique characters that have a menacing or absorptive presence. Just by looking at them, you can't wait to find out what their story is. Maybe it's not a person that you find, but perhaps a cool piece of equipment that is completely unique to that specific location, meaning that the game rewards you for going out of your way to search the world. These are the characteristics of a great exploration. Each location must be like a box of chocolates, even if, more often than not, that intriguing looking place that you found simply turns out to be a structure that you loot for supplies. On the other hand, a building where you least expect to find anything might have an extremely unique side story that makes you appreciate the adventure. I mean, do I even need to get to my point? You can probably already guess that Fallout 3 is nothing like this. Sure, sometimes you might find a captivating spot with fascinating side quests like the one in the Oasis, but these situations are very rare. When you stumble upon something that actually looks interesting, most of the time it will be inhabited by bandits or some variation that is only different in appearance, and once you deal with all of them, you are rewarded with some loot. After all, this is a video game, you should be rewarded for clearing areas. Oh boy, a fat man! Again, more chems that I'm already barely using? Count me in! It's not like I already found all of this in the last building that I raided, but it can hurt to have even more. Man, I am so glad that this is what I should be expecting whenever I decide to explore this huge map. Joking aside, on a few occasions Fallout 3 does get this aspect of gameplay right. For example, if you poke your nose around the Museum of History, you might find the Lincoln rifle. This is a high-powered lever-action rifle that you can only find in this specific building, and the only way to do that is to explore and pay attention to your surroundings. In exchange, a game provides you with a great new toy that you can try out. In situations like this, I feel disappointed even more because it shows just how amazing the game could have been. It simply wasn't designed to make the exploration feel satisfying. This is especially true when you take a deeper look at how the environment around you is organized. The world of Fallout 3 is structured in a way that is weird and illogical. For example, you could be just wandering around and stumble upon two identical statues in close proximity that are placed in a way that doesn't adhere to symmetry, consistency, or any other attribute that would be used by an architect when designing a city. On the other hand, you might come across a certain quest in Big Town where you need to help the prisoners that were kidnapped by super mutants in an abandoned police station. When I got near the building, I saw that no one was patrolling outside. I genuinely thought that this was the start of a really good quest that might not be so straightforward. Perhaps there are no super mutants and the townspeople were simply waiting in the building to ambush me, or maybe they were killed by some mysterious creature that happened to pass by. As my mind raced, all of my hopes were dashed the moment I entered the police station and discovered that super mutants were indeed present. They simply forgot to place some guards outside for some reason. What's more, the building is filled with mines, meaning that these guys have put themselves at unnecessary risk by placing mines not outside of their base, where it would actually make sense, but inside their living quarters. There are millions of examples like this across the wasteland. You might say all of this is nitpicking, but to me this is just bad game design. Why wasn't there more thought put into structuring a makeshift super mutant base? Why are they not stationed both inside and outside of the camp, where they could keep an eye for any visitors? This minor difference would actually make the world make more sense. Even some of the weapons are not safe from terrible design. The microwave emitter is a unique energy weapon added to Fallout 3 in the Point Lookout DLC that the player can pick up when the DLC's storyline is finished. The gun itself takes up almost a third of the screen and most of the time you can't see what you are shooting at. Its projectiles are extremely slow, making this weapon terrible outside of VATS. However, despite all of this, the biggest problem with the design itself is related to the open world gameplay. In hbomberguy's video, he criticized how in Fallout 3 you could theoretically go anywhere, but every corner of the world felt the same with no actual depth. That is because wherever you are, the game will generate enemies based on your current level. This way you won't get lost or end up somewhere you weren't supposed to be. It is easy to see how this ties into an issue that I've already mentioned multiple times. Every part of the wasteland feels the same because the game is constantly watching over you. So in theory you could go anywhere you want from your starting position, but at the expense of everything having the depth of a puddle. In previous games, the world was well structured, with many characters and quests that pointed you in the right direction, but despite that, the feeling of exploration was still there because you managed to follow clues and information that the game provided. If you wander off too much, there will be extreme difficulty spikes that are put in place because you are not meant to explore that part of the map yet. As a result, the system feels much more rewarding because you manage to traverse that tumultuous wasteland by carefully observing the story and the world around you, which is nothing like Fallout 3, which spawns enemies near your level to keep you from feeling trapped, but not even that system is put in place properly. For example, at the beginning you will mostly come across these red scorpions out in the wild. They are a bit tough, but nothing you can handle, and as you progress, killing them becomes much easier. As you slowly reach level 30, the game detects that you are getting stronger, so now the regular red scorpions are being replaced by albino red scorpions, and these abominations are complete bullet sponges. Even at max level, killing them is an absolute chore, and now they are spawning all over the map. Don't even get me started on those fucking ghoul reavers. My god, how I despise them. They are the most powerful ghoul type in the game. They run very fast, have an absurd amount of health, and can kill you in few hits. Keep in mind that this is at max level with complete power armor. They create a massive difficulty spike for no fucking reason. I do understand that some enemies must be stronger than others, usually because their placement is strategically important in designing a level, but here there is no dynamic difficulty progression. Level 1 ghouls and ghoul reavers can be found in the same area. Your best bet is to avoid these as much as possible because killing them grants you nothing. They don't hold anything of value and usually they don't guard some piece of equipment that might be worth the trouble of engaging them in combat. They are not strategically placed around the map in a way that actually makes sense. While we are at that subject, the design of the map is really dry. Generally, we can divide it into two parts, the DC ruins and the wasteland around it. The outskirts are mostly treated as a wilderness, where you can stumble upon various wild animals or abandoned buildings and towns. Ironically, the DC ruins, the supposed war zone that should be the most interesting area due to constant fighting between major factions, is the worst part of the map. First of all, the entire city is in ruin, so most streets are inaccessible. That means you have to constantly use metro tunnels, which usually contain goals and not much else. Even with the quest marker, it is still hard to guess where you have to go, since most of the streets are inaccessible. There is also nothing distinct about the city, every part of it feels the same. I agree that some design decisions in creating a video game should be given the benefit of the doubt. For example, the already mentioned Megaton is a town made out of scrap that has a working atomic bomb in its center. It is stupid. It doesn't make any logical sense. The town's history is absurd, but gameplay-wise, it is actually pretty good. It is very easy to navigate and the layout is clear and well organized. Most of you probably remember Megaton's interior to this day because of how unique and simple it is. Rivet City, on the other hand, is complete opposite. From a realistic standpoint, it seems completely reasonable that people would make a town inside of an old, decaying aircraft carrier. After all, it is a huge structure that has a pretty good defense from all sides as well as only one entrance. However, when applied to a video game, this town is nothing more than a maze. I have played Fallout 3 enough to last me 3 lifetimes, but I still have no idea where am I supposed to go when I'm inside. A convoluted mess of hallways with no distinct landmarks. I am confused about why some parts of the ship even exist when they serve no real purpose. Even though Rivet City is a perfect example of how not to design a town in a video game, it still hosts one of my favorite side quests, the Replicated Man. Some guy assigns you the task of locating his human-like android using only a holotape he left behind as a clue of where to look. The best thing about this quest is that there is no marker. You must locate this android entirely on your own. There are also a decent number of options here. You can use your medical knowledge during conversation with the various doctors to discover that the android underwent facial replacement surgery. You also must talk with other people to find out more clues. It is a breath of fresh air compared to everything else that the game gives you. I must again stop my praise to rant about something else, because if I had to give Fallout 3 some credit, it would be for having one of the worst DLCs that I have ever played. I don't know what the person who made Operation Anchorage was smoking, but I would beg him to have his dealer contact me within the next 10 business days. This DLC broke me, because it felt like it was made by a completely different studio. Even by Fallout 3's low standards, this content is nothing short of atrocious. Yeah, why don't we make a DLC that removes everything that makes Fallout games great? The exploration, looting, trading, scavenging, and intricate story decisions that shape the world and characters around you. Let's toss all of that out the window and make a piece of content that is strictly centered around combat. Fallout 3's combat isn't even good, but it doesn't need to be, because that's not the main selling point. This abomination has you placed in a simulation that recreates an important military battle or some shit. The purpose is that once completed, the pre-war vault will open up, which has all sorts of equipment that some members of the Brotherhood Outcast want to get their hands on. So yeah, around 4 hours of mindless shooting around restricted areas in a game whose main selling point is freedom and exploration. What a great use of my time and money. Who made this? You might ask me, why am I then always playing this DLC when I replay Fallout 3? It's because this is the only way to obtain the Gauss rifle, my favorite sniper rifle in the game. Operation Anchorage is an embarrassment. Other DLCs, for what they are pretty good. They add more interesting content while keeping the essential elements of the game intact. I am not sure what else to say. I already covered a lot of ground when it comes to what in Fallout 3 doesn't work. Somewhere deep inside there could have been a good game, but the constant underperformance of various gameplay elements that are integral to its experience is a big detriment. I want to love it, but my intuition knows better. Despite everything I just said, I could have gone past all of these problems if not for one thing. This actually brings us to the section of the video where I will discuss the biggest problem I have with Fallout 3. This problem shows us the real squandered opportunity of how amazing this game could have been. The story. The starting premise of Fallout 1 and 2 is fairly similar. A player is a chosen member of an isolated society that must leave his home in order to find a piece of an old technology to save his community. It is a very simple but effective beginning. You, pretty much like your character, know nothing about the wasteland, who lives there, what communities exist, and what troubles do they face. All of this must be uncovered so that you can traverse this desolate land. In the process of doing so, a player will uncover a looming mystery, something insidious that is happening beneath the surface that not even the people who are familiar with the outside world know anything about. It is an intriguing adventure that captivates your interest the more you play it. Fallout 3, despite having a template of two amazing previous games, simply didn't deliver to the same standard. The way Bethesda missed some crucial points in creating a story, I get the feeling they don't actually understand this series. I mean, the very beginning starts with your literal birth and then follows with an excruciating half an hour of your time that represents your character's life inside the vault until the moment you are forced to leave. In all that time, you learn nothing about the world. It is a mindless tutorial that is way too long for its own good and is flying directly in the face of what Fallout is actually about, which is freedom and choice. Compare and contrast this with the amazing opening of Fallout 2. Even if you have basic knowledge of what happened in the previous game, it will be enough for this intro to captivate you. You see people finally leaving the vault. Occasionally some old Vault Tech commercials come up, and the moment they open their gates, these strange soldiers that carry some kind of a power armor all of a sudden start shooting at them. It's short, sweet, but most importantly engaging, with just enough information to pique your interest and leave you wanting more. After starting the game, the first thing you do is create your character. Following that, a new cutscene begins, but this one involves you. Some old woman who turns out to be an elder of some sort tells you how your village is going through a terrible crisis. Death and decay are all over the place and you are the only one who can stop that. The elder tells you of an ancient technology called the GEC, which is a terraforming device created by Vault-Tec and meant to ease the process of harnessing the post-nuclear wasteland. You must venture out and somehow find this device, or else your home is doomed. The stakes are immediately obvious. The mystery in the intro is intriguing. Everything is set up perfectly for you to go on an adventure. That precious time at the beginning that sets up the tone is wasted in Fallout 3. One of the most crucial parts that is here to hook you up with the story falls flat, leaving you to think there might be something interesting if you keep playing. After you leave the starting section of your vault, you are tasked with finding your father. You don't know why he left or why he would ever abandon you. That is for the player to find out. As previously stated, you must travel to Megaton and speak with Mordecai, the sleazy owner of the local saloon, who has information that could lead to your father, but only if you do a job for him. He wants you to collect some money from a debitor who lives nearby. This job is a pathetic excuse for a quest that can take you up to 2 minutes to complete. The entire time I was struggling not to ask myself why Mordecai couldn't have done that himself. The house is just outside of town and the person gladly gives away the money she owes. So what's the point? After finishing it, Mordecai points you to a different guy called Three Dog, who is a radio host for Galaxy News Radio. The quest marker then shows you where to go on your map, which doesn't make any sense since Mordecai didn't give specific locations to the building where Three Dog is, so you are forced to follow this demonic cursor once again. When you enter the DC ruins, you will see the Brotherhood of Steel and super mutants engaged in furious combat. I have to interrupt again to explain how stupid this is. The story of Fallout 3 takes place on the east coast of the United States, which is a stark contrast to the previous games, which took place in the deserts of California. So how exactly is it that these two factions somehow made it to Washington DC? Oh boy, I can't wait to tell you the absolutely amazing explanation. See, these people are actually a rogue chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel that originally came to the East Coast to recover any piece of old technology they could find. Following their arrival in the capital wasteland, they eventually split from the Brotherhood we know from previous series. This new order follows a distinct version of the Brotherhood's beliefs that is called the Lion's Doctrine, which emphasizes the charity to outsiders. My god, it's even worse when I'm reading it out loud. And why are super mutants here? Well, these are completely new super mutants that were created in the Evolutionary Experimentation Program, a project assigned to Vault 87, which is located near Washington. A new modified strain of FEV was used to create the breed of super mutants we see in this game. Yes, this is the explanation. You know what? While we are at it, why not throw in Enclave as well? At this point, who gives a shit about those irrelevant things like consistent storytelling or already established lore? Throw them all in, boys! For me to explain to you why all of this simply does not work, I must first show you how Fallout 3 completely mishandles these factions. The Brotherhood of Steel used to be a techno-religious military group that harbored technology for itself because they thought only the worthy should have the chance to use it. They believe in keeping technology and knowledge out of the hands of the ignorant savages who now occupy the American wasteland in the aftermath of the Great Nuclear War. Elder Lands, once arriving in DC, went against everything that Brotherhood stood for, giving military-grade technology to everyone who happened to stumble by. And my god, don't even get me started on super mutants. Originally, super mutants were created by the so-called Master by injecting humans with a unique virus that was developed before the war, whose main purpose was to cure the new plague and counter any biological weapons used by China. The Master's ultimate plan was to infect everyone in the wasteland with the virus and transform all of them into super mutants in the hopes of putting an end to human conflict. In the end, it was the World Dweller who killed him and put an end to his plans. The intriguing aspect of this is how Fallout 2 depicted the struggles of the remaining super mutants. Now left with no master to guide them, they try to find their place in a world whose inhabitants mostly reject them. You encounter some of them in a town called Broken Hills where they dig up uranium, which is something they do with ease because of their resistance to radiation. It is also here that you can meet Marcus, the town's sheriff and one of the most interesting characters in the entire game. You can talk with him about a variety of subjects, including his thoughts about the present and the past, how he initially opposed the Master's ideas but eventually came to agree with him after seeing the state of the wasteland. No matter what happens, humans will always struggle against one another, there will always be a new war to wage. He is also reminiscent of the World Dweller, an exemplary human who fought for his beliefs but was also the one who destroyed the Master. He concludes his thoughts by saying that he both despises and admires the World Dweller, and that if everyone was like him, the Master's plan would not be necessary. Fallout 2 is an amazing game, just because of these moments. It shows an unbelievably human element from a character whose race was treated as cannon fodder in the previous game. Despite looking like a monster, he is someone you can relate to, someone you can understand, someone you can... Fallout 3 reverted to treating super mutants as cannon fodder, turning them into screaming lunatics who just attack anyone on sight. The biggest problem in all of this is that both super mutants and the Brotherhood of Steel were included in this game solely for the sake of being a recognizable element of the franchise, with no regard for consistency or logical storytelling. To actually appreciate this pathetic situation, you must take a look at the bigger picture, because these two factions were also included in both Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. The latter of which makes no logical sense since that game is set 59 years before the original Fallout. Bethesda just doesn't give a shit. By their standards, any excuse is enough. The Brotherhood of Steel and Super Mutants simply must be in every game from now on. I despise the fact that this rant took so long, but it needs to last a little longer because now it is time to talk about the Enclave. Enclave first appeared in Fallout 2 and you can only see a glimpse of them for the majority of the game because your main focus is on finding a Gek to save your village. Only when they abduct your tribesmen are you forced to track them down and figure out what they're up to. While in their base, you find out that they are the self-proclaimed continuation of the United States of America that survived the Great War on an isolated control station off the coast of California. Their main goal now is to recreate the old world on a clean slate. In order to stop their plans, you had to destroy their main base at the end of the game, which also raises the question of how they managed to get to DC and still remain a militant superpower. All of the above mentioned factions did not need to be in this game. Their stories have already been told. Bethesda made a huge mistake by including them, and how it represents them is even worse. Most of the time I feel like I'm playing a recycled version of previous games without all the good writing I came to expect. The nuance and depth that made these factions interesting are gone, and they are replaced by a generic version of good guys versus bad guys. While the Enclave were indeed the main antagonist in Fallout 2, their faction served to show a greater message of what made the old regime of the United States a failure. Talking to the president, you learn just how absurd these outdated ideals were and still are. His unapologetic way of saying how it is acceptable to kill anyone who doesn't fit their idea of normal. It's a subtle way of showing the player how the previous regime managed to destroy the entire world in a nuclear war. On the other hand, the Brotherhood of Steel was never meant to be a good faction. They are just a radical militant group that doesn't give a shit about the people around them. In the first game, you can convince them to help you you destroy a super mutant base, but that is only because they realized the threat it posed to them, while in Fallout 2 they were faced with a disturbing fact that their ideals ultimately led to their failure, how their hoarding of technology rendered them obsolete in the face of the Enclave. The game actually goes into specific details about this, how Enclave's vertibird technology provided significant advantages because it allowed them to transport personnel and equipment over the air at amazing speed. It is such an interesting and, when you think about it, very realistic element of the world that Fallout 3 never even mentions. Even though the Enclave still has the vertibirds, there is so much to say about inconsistencies like these, and I will, but for now, let's get back to the main questline. After assisting the Brotherhood of Steel in their fight against super mutants, you meet Three Dog, who has some information about your father's whereabouts. But first, you must complete a quest for him. You know, because it was so funny the first time. So you do the job and Three Dog directs you to Rivet City, where you will meet Dr. Janice. She introduces herself as an old member of your father's team and says that she does in fact know where he went next. And the best part is, she shares this information without sending you to do her dirty work first. Wow, thanks I guess. The Jefferson Memorial is the next stop. Unfortunately, he isn't there either, but you find some holotapes that confirm that he was indeed in this location some time ago. While listening to these holotapes, you figure out that your dad left the vault in the hopes of finishing Project Purity, something he worked on before you were born but never completed. The diary revealed that he believed Vault 112 might hold a solution to finishing his project, so that is where you go next. Inside the vault, you discover that all of the residents are trapped in a virtual world where a character named Dr. Braun asserts his control and treats others like toys, including your father. After putting an end to this virtual nightmare, you and your father wake up from your pods and you finally get to talk with him. One of the biggest questions until this point was why your dad actually abandoned you in a vault. What was so important that it would justify leaving behind your child? It was a mystery until this point. What exactly is Project Purity? He reveals that your mother and him, along with their old team that is now in Rivet City, used to work on a project that would purify the radiated water, giving people in the wasteland an abundance of this precious resource. However, after the arrival of the super mutants and the death of your mother, the project was cancelled. But despite all of that, your father still wanted to continue his work. There is a lot to digest here, so let's start with this. Your father, a character with whom you needed to connect at the start of the game and someone you had been looking for until this point, is not really relatable. When he abandoned you in the vault, he never even left a goodbye letter to his only child, whom he probably won't ever see again. In the holotapes he left at the Jefferson Memorial, he described his thoughts on Project Purity. He mentions you once as a reference to leaving you behind. When you finally find him, he insists on returning to Rivet City as soon as possible to reassemble his old team, because he discovered a secret to completing his project. He has no time to explain his feelings and justifications to you. During this part of the game, I tried desperately to keep this conversation going. After everything he has done, as well as everything I have done to get him, he owes me more than this piss-poor excuse of why he left me behind. I wanted to know more. I wanted this conversation to last so I could pour my heart out, but I couldn't because the game wants us to move on with the main quest. One of the most important dialogues in the game is thrown aside so that the plot can continue. When you eventually help him recover his old team, you all meet outside of the Jefferson Memorial, where he asks you, his only child, if you could clear the super mutants that are currently in the building while he and his buddies chill outside. He simply doesn't give a shit about you. It is strange that people think that Fallout 3 builds a connection with your dad when he isn't even acting like a caring parent. By the way, why am I expected to help anyone with this project? My main concern was finding my father. I never consented to anything else. Once you clear the building, the team will start their preparations while you do more chores around the site. Somewhere in the middle of all this, the Enclave will show up and take control of the station. In order to sabotage their progress, your dad heroically sacrifices himself. At this point, even the game knows that you just don't care anymore, so why dwell on it too much when we have a team of scientists to evacuate? So you head through some underground tunnels which will lead you to the Citadel, a base of the Brotherhood of Steel, and they are more than happy to let you in, which is a completely normal thing for this faction to do, especially when you consider the fact that you are a complete stranger to them. I mean, it's not like letting you in might pose a direct threat to their security, especially now that the Enclave is running around. Man, the more I play Fallout 3, the more it makes sense. Somewhere around here, you might have noticed another creeping problem, which is a lack of choice. Why am I forced to help my dad with the purifier? Maybe I think that project is stupid and I want to do something else. Why do I have to work with Brotherhood of Steel? Maybe I want to join the Enclave and kick the Brotherhood out of this territory. The point that I'm trying to make is that in a game about freedom of choice, where your decisions have consequences, why is the main questline following an extremely linear route? You, the player, are just a pawn in somebody else's game. This actually leads to some very funny moments. For example, you can kill Brotherhood members all over the wasteland, but since they are an integral part of finishing the main quest, important characters will just talk with you like nothing happened, completely ignoring the blood trail I created using their followers' guts. There's also a lot to be said about the main quest's lack of effort. The Brotherhood is already familiar with your father and the project he wanted to create, so you reveal them the secret that the only way to make this project work is by obtaining a GEC. The best place to look for one is inside a vault, so the Brotherhood just gives you access to its archives to find a vault that might contain this piece of equipment. After that, you just go to some terminal, you find the vault, go there, fight some super mutants, and wouldn't you know, the GEC is there! It was that easy! If you actually want to hear a competent and fun story around this interesting item, all you have to do is play Fallout 2. At the beginning, your elder sends you to find one, and the majority of the game is dedicated to that. But here is the deal, you are not simply told where to go. All you know is that there once existed a piece of technology that could save your village, but that was centuries ago. Who knows if something like that even exists anymore? So you ask around, maybe someone knows where it is. Most of the time, people don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and the ones who do have very limited information. You are searching for something so ancient that some communities see it as a holy relic, something that at this point in time might as well just be a pipe dream. The player is pretty much like a Spanish explorer who is trying to find a fountain of youth. One time you stumble across a village in the middle of nowhere and the town elder says he knows where to find the GEC. However, he will tell you only if you help his village with the looming threat. Once you complete the quest, he confesses that he actually doesn't know anything about the GEC, let alone where to find one, but he had to lie because his community was in dire need of your help. At first, you are angry that the game treated you like that, but when you think about it, everything about this story makes sense. How could a guy in this isolated town know anything about such specific and ancient pre-war technology? That is what makes Fallout 2 so great. It's an amazing game about navigating a world based on information that other people tell you. You are searching for a needle in a haystack, and the needle might not even be there. This entire story is turned into a joke in Fallout 3, because the computer just straight up tells you where you can find this important piece of equipment. No questions asked, it is that easy. My biggest problem is why it had to be the GEC specifically, a technology previously viewed as hard to get, bordering on impossible. Is it just another way to shove previous story elements down our throats while completely forgetting what those elements actually meant in past games? Hey, you know what they say, it gets worse before it gets even worse. Before you can escape the vault with the GEC, you are captured by the Enclave and brought to their base. While you are inside, you can actually speak with them and try to understand what their deal in this region might be. Until this point, they would always shoot you on sight with no questions asked, pretty much like the crazed super mutants. One thing that always bugs me in this section is what happens once President Eden releases you so that you might go speak with him. The guard just outside the room is alerted to your presence, so he asks what are you doing out of your cell, and if you don't convince him that you have permission, then the fight just starts. So let me get this straight, the president lets me go out of my cage, but he somehow forgot to tell the person outside of my cell that I was free to go. Eden will eventually announce that you must not be harmed while you walk inside the perimeter, only for Colonel Anthem to reverse that decision minutes later, and then everyone just attacks you. After fighting your way through, you will finally meet the enigmatic President Eden only to find that he is a computer. This should serve as a very important moment in the game, since now you can finally speak with the leader of the Enclave. Eden then explains how he's trying to eradicate the mutants from the wasteland. This is actually the same motivation as the Enclave in Fallout 2, but in that game it was again done in a much better way. When talking to President Richard, he explains that their primary goal is to recreate humanity in the image of the old world. The Enclave itself and their ilk are considered pure humans because of their time in isolation, meaning that their DNA didn't get corrupted because of the radiation. To do that, they want to eradicate mutants from the wasteland, and that includes pretty much everyone. This doesn't just include ghouls and super mutants, but even people like you, because despite the fact that you all look the same, your DNA has been twisted in some way as the result of exposure. You can see right away that wanting a large-scale genocide based on such trivial matters is insane, but that is the Enclave's main problem. Richard is a relic from the past. He represents everything wrong with the old world. He is so deep in his beliefs that he sees nothing wrong here. For him, this isn't a morally dubious action. Even when you threaten to kill him, he says he doesn't mind dying if he dies a patriot. The absurdity of it!
You might find that tougher than you think. If you do, I'll go to my reward knowing that I died a patriot and a servant of humanity.
You can plainly see that there is no reasoning with this guy. Another great example of the Enclave's twisted ideals is when you talk to Frank Horrigan, who insultingly calls you a mutant and then attacks you, despite the fact that he himself is a super mutant. But it doesn't matter to him, his fanaticism makes him blind to this very obvious fact. In Fallout 3, President Eden wants you to do the same thing, and then gives you a flask of a virus to poison the water purifier your father made in the hopes of cleaning the wasteland. The big problem here is his explanation.
Our land is ravaged by mutation. The war was so many years ago, and yet we still suffer from its effects. We cannot move forward until humanity can gain a solid foothold in the world. To do so, we must rid ourselves of the mutations that have plagued us for so long. These super mutants, ghouls, hideous creatures.
My brother in Christ, that is not good enough of a reason for me to commit genocide. Never mind the fact that Eden is saying this to me, the last person he should trust with this plan. Enclave murdered my father and has been shooting at me without hesitation for the majority of the game. There is no incentive for me to ever agree to these terms. I wanted desperately to find some way for Eden to perhaps elaborate a bit further on why he believes what he believes. Why should I ever follow his plan if there is nothing to follow? While I was talking with him, I came to a sudden realization. Out of nowhere, I remembered the Oasis side quest, where you came across a group of people who lived on a land that seems to be blooming for some reason while the rest of the wasteland is still desolate. You discover that this is due to Harold, a talking tree who appears to be the source of this. He begs you to kill him because he doesn't want to live like this anymore. At the same time, his followers want him to live so that he can fertilize the region. At the heart of the land, you can choose his fate. And taking into account how his existence can be a huge benefit for the wasteland, I decided to let him live. When Harold asked me why I did that, the dialogue option didn't reflect what I was thinking. I could say something about how I wanted to make his followers happy, but in all honesty, I couldn't care less what these hippies thought. I wanted him to live in the hopes that he could cultivate the land. But there was no option for that. When I saved my dad and he asked me why I left the vault, there was no way for me to explain to him how the overseer went mad and that he wanted to kill me. The game never assumed that I might say these words, and just like that, there is no way to dig deeper into Eden's claims. He offers me nothing of substance about why I should take such a radical action. If you have chosen to poison the water at the end of the game, you objectively chose the wrong option, because there isn't a significant reason to do something so drastic. It is also really funny that you can convince Eden to destroy the Enclave by simply saying that it is time to stop the cycle of violence or some shit like that.
And why would I do that, when I'm clearly the best hope for the people of the wasteland? What alternative would you suggest? Without the Enclave, what will the world do? Yes, I suppose it is. Very well. You shall have your wish. Once you've left, I'll put an end to the Enclave.
That sentence alone was enough for this character to abandon everything he believed in. He clearly does not trust his own convictions, so why should you? Keeping with another trend of your actions having no consequences, once you convince him to destroy the Enclave, nothing happens. You get a cool explosion effect once you go outside the base, but other than that, nothing. The Enclave is still at Jefferson Memorial and nobody even mentions it. After you escape, you go to the Brotherhood and inform them that the Enclave has the Gek and is ready to start the Purifier. In order to stop them, the Brotherhood activates Liberty Prime and you all charge into a final battle to take control of the Jefferson Memorial, which is currently being held by the remaining Enclave soldiers. This fight is actually pretty boring, not gonna lie. I mean, Liberty Prime and Brotherhood just do all the killing. After this underwhelming experience, you will eventually reach the Memorial, fight some more Enclave soldiers and eventually get to the Purifier, where Anthem is waiting. Final confrontations in video games are usually a pretty big deal. They represent a concluding element in the story where everything you had to face is condensed into this one encounter. The cards are down and there is no going back. In many cases, this should be the high point of the experience, since this will be your last impression of the game. Fallout 3 does this horribly. The first reason why is because Colonel Adam is not really a good antagonist. The one interaction you can have with him before the final encounter is nowhere near enough for you to understand his motives and beliefs. He is not a culmination of everything you have gone through. He is just a generic bad guy. All of this just showed me how uninteresting he is when compared to the Master or Frank Harrigan. Anthem also never mentions Eden's plans for purging the wasteland, meaning he only wants the Purifier so that people will flock to the Enclave side since they will have an abundance of water. This final dialogue is a joke. I don't know what else to say about it. Worse, you can even convince Anthem to leave so you don't have to fight him. This is probably the only time in a video game that I was angry that the developers gave me a choice. This speech check is atrocious. Why wouldn't you wanna kill him? It's not like this conversation is happening outside of the building before the battle, where I could convince him to throw his sword to stop the bloodshed. No, we are at the steps of the Purifier. The battle is done. And I have an option to let this guy leave while his men are still dying all over the place for his lost cause. This person has no right to leave this room alive. We are way past the time for talking. It is kill or be killed now. It is also really bizarre that one of the ways in which you can convince him to leave is by explaining how Eden's presidency is illegitimate. He will confront you by saying that he has to respect the chain of command, even though he started a coup against him not even an hour before. And with that, we arrive at the final decision of the game. Someone has to activate the Purifier inside the chamber, which is currently heavily radiated. This awful section is despised by almost everyone, even by the people who like Fallout 3. The design choices made here are baffling to me. For starters, let's remember that infamous moment that happened if you asked your super mutant follower if he could go inside and activate the project, because, as you know, he is a super mutant and thus immune to radiation.
I'm sorry, my companion, but no. We all have our own destinies, and yours culminates here.
Yes, the game is actually mocking you for suggesting something that is completely reasonable. Bethesda actually knew how stupid this was, so in the Broken Steel DLC, Falkins will actually go inside to activate the Purifier. But the funny thing is, the ending credits didn't account for this, since it was first imagined that only you or Sarah would enter the chamber, and because of that, you will get a line like this.
It was not until the end of this long road that the lone wanderer was faced with that greatest of virtues: sacrifice. But the child refused to follow the father's selfless example, instead allowing a true hero to venture into the irradiated control chamber of Project Purity.
True hero? The fuck you're talking about? My character is the reason all the pieces fell into place for this project to work, and now you are telling me that the follower that activated the Purifier on my incentive, mind you, is the true hero? The game is calling me a coward for not dying when that was not even necessary. Like I said, if you have Broken Steel DLC, the game will actually continue after that point, with Sarah and you somehow surviving that situation. It really is a shame that the player had to pay to get a better ending. The rest of the the game really doesn't matter. The main quest charges you with destroying the remnants of the enclave that are still active. At the end of the day, it all just boils down to shooting more bad guys. You do that, you come home, Lion congratulates you, and now you can continue playing the game on your own. The supposed fix that is Broken Steel DLC is nothing more than someone trying to use duct tape to patch leaking holes in a half-torn building. Sure, it eases the problem a little bit, but it can't fix the problems that were made during the construction. To say that this game was underwhelming would be putting it lightly. The ending of Fallout 3 always leaves me bewildered. Nothing is explained, nothing is gained, there is no captivating message that I got from it. There is no philosophical stance on things like life without civilization, survival in the wasteland, human nature, and all the other interesting questions that were part and parcel of previous games. When you take a look at the ending of Fallout 1, you will understand what I'm trying to tell you. When you get face to face with the monster, you feel disgusted. This monster that is before you is the reason for so many tragedies in the region. This mockery of life is responsible for unspeakable horrors that have been unleashed onto the world. You want nothing more than to start shooting, putting him out of his miserable existence. However, if you have been invested in the story, talking to everyone, gathering the evidence, and most importantly having the patience to hear the master out, you will have an incredible experience. The core of his motivation is hope for a better future. He believes that only super mutants can accomplish this. The monstrous things he has done are, in his eyes, justified for the greater good. Interaction with the master is the highlight of the game. For someone with such an inhuman appearance, his motivations and ideals are something you can sympathize with, but he is misguided, he is doing it the wrong way. If you want to convince him to abandon his convictions, you have to present him with a clear and undeniable fact that makes his plan impossible. When I reminisce about this encounter, it really is one of those rare magic video game moments. This is how you do an interactive story. If you want to talk Master into abandoning his plan, you don't just flip his entire worldview with a high enough speech skill that is obviously highlighted so you don't miss it. You must have the seemingly insignificant holodisk in your possession, and then you actually have to read it. It is designed to test your beliefs and prove that you actually know that the super mutants are sterile, and because of that his operation won't work. When you finally convince the Master that there is no hope for his mutant race, he reflects on everything he did. The reality of his actions sets in, and what's worse, he did it all for nothing.
I don't think that I can continue to have done the things I have done in the name of progress and healing. It was madness. I can see that now. Madness. Madness? There is no hope. Leave now. Leave while you still have hope.
That is just brilliant. You defeated the biggest threat to the world, not just by waving your guns around, but with logical judgment and reason. And in the end, you even start to feel sad for the Master himself. Although a terrifying monster, in his final moment he shows his human side, which even you can relate to. The game gradually prompts you to consider some very interesting and profound existential questions about survival, morality, hope, and most importantly, humanity. Fallout 3 could have been like that. That could have been its legacy. But instead of that, we got Colonel Anthem. Many important elements of the game simply dropped the ball, leaving us with quite a disappointing experience. I'm not sure what else to say. Maybe I expected too much from this game. Perhaps all of the mechanics and polished story elements are too much for this kind of a project. It could be that I have set ridiculously high standards that no Fallout game could ever match.
The game was rigged from the start.
I always claimed that releasing Fallout New Vegas was Bethesda's biggest mistake. Because from now on, until the end of days, every Fallout game that was and will forever live in its shadow. Every game that comes out in this franchise might be good or even excellent, but it won't be Fallout New Vegas. Detailed and crisp world building, intriguing and intricate side quests that are interconnected while offering multiple solutions to a problem. Side quests are so well integrated with the the rest of the gameplay that simply walking into a casino to earn a few caps on blackjack can lead you to working for the sleazy owners. Oh, did I mention the deep crafting and cooking system that uses many of the ambient items that you just ignored before? Skill checks in speech have more clear uses and actually make sense. For example, if you are proficient in medicine, you can figure out if a guy is an addict and thus offer to sell him your drugs. But the most important part is an absolutely amazing main quest that revolves around the upcoming battle of Hoover Dam, and the stakes are immediately noticeable. With many factions fighting in the region and the local population caught in the crossfire, the main characters have interesting and most importantly understandable motivations and ideals that you can discuss and debate. And don't even get me started with the amazing DLCs like Dead Money. This DLC is much more than just getting better equipment or shooting at people. It is also actively trying to make a statement about letting go of needless riches. You can even decide to go against everything the DLC is trying to teach you by taking all the gold from the casino. My god, why isn't Fallout 3 more like this? It's not surprising that New Vegas is so good. After all, it was made by the guys who worked on the originals. This game opened my eyes to the wasted potential of Fallout 3. Instead of Mr. House, we got President Eden. Instead of Leggett Lenius, we got Colonel fucking Anthem. Wait, you know what? Screw it. We are going back to this final room. Excuse me, just how important is Project Purity in the bigger picture? There is no NPC interaction or side quest that makes you deal with some kind of a water problem. Something like two communities colliding due to scarcity of resources or entire towns that are abandoned because of drought. Nobody, and I do mean nobody, in the wasteland outside of the main quest ever mentions the problem with water. I mean, sure, when you drink from the river, you get minor radiation, and if you drink too much, you must visit a doctor to help you out. Yeah, not doing that would be nice, but having clean water everywhere seems like a solution to a minor issue rather than something that would cause a full-scale regional conflict. Your father is so dedicated to making this project work to a point of abandoning his only child, while the detriment of not succeeding doesn't seem that bad. Life seems to be thriving in every corner of the wasteland. How exactly does the problem with water fit into all of this? So I guess Colonel Anthem is prepared to sacrifice the majority of his army in the hope of getting this machine that would put him in a water market that already exists among various traders. The reward is nowhere near worth the effort. He and his followers died for it. None of this makes any sense, and this is the conclusion of one of the most anticipated games ever made. Who wrote this? The fact that I simply cannot deny is that making video games is hard. To create an intricate world like the one in Fallout 3, a large number of pieces must fall into the right place. Unfortunately, a large number of them did not. I get the feeling that people at Bethesda were too afraid to craft their own story within the universe, which is why most of the story elements are copied and pasted from before. In actuality, the thing that would make a great Fallout game would be something we'd never seen before. More risks should have been taken. There is so much room for experimentation. Maybe, despite all of these issues that I listed, you still like this game, and there is nothing wrong with that. If not for Fallout 3, this series might just have been an old and obscure franchise that a few people remember now and then. It catapulted it into the mainstream. For most of you, Fallout 3 was probably the game that got you into the series, so at least we can be thankful for that. And you know what is weird? When I finish making this video, I will probably turn on Fallout 3 and still play it. I am not sure why. Maybe on some deep level I do think that it is good, while the more plausible reason is that the feeling of nostalgia is enough for me to look past its many mistakes. You are probably in the same boat as me when it comes to having a love-hate relationship with this game, so maybe you can understand what I'm talking about. Whatever the case may be, before I end the video, I just wanted to show you my entire bobblehead collection. Yes, I did pick up all of them just for shits and giggles. It was definitely a chore and not worth my time, but I'm glad I did it. And yes, I am seeking professional help, and the same goes for the topic of the next video. Thanks for dropping by and stay safe.